There are two key challenges facing religious education at the present time, I think. One is to do with the purpose of the subject, and the other is to do with the structures around the subject. Well, on the purpose of the subject, it's becoming more and more clear that we do not have a clear consensus about what the point of religious education is in the curriculum. If a teacher of RE goes into their head teacher's office and says, give me more time for religious education, give me more resources for RE, give me more teachers for RE, the question why then turns into a debate about several different possible answers for RE. It promotes community cohesion and good relations between members of different faiths. It promotes well-being and spiritual and moral development. It helps to support the teaching of British values in schools. It's an academic subject in its own right. All of these answers are in the marketplace at the moment, and we need a really strong debate about which of those answers actually works best for us as a diverse, religious and secular society in this country. And at the heart of that debate, I think, there needs to be the concept of religious literacy, or as I prefer to call it, theological and philosophical literacy, which means asking ourselves as a country, what do we want our young people leaving school to know and understand about religion and belief in this country and in the world? And until we have a clear answer to that, then I think we are always going to be struggling to defend RE's place in the marketplace, and also struggling to design it well in schools. What needs to happen is that the subject needs to have a strong sense of its core, a strong sense of this is what we're about. It's not that, it's not the other, it's this. It's teaching and learning to high standards about the vital, burning questions of the place of religion and belief in the modern world. And it's giving young people some equipment, some knowledge and understanding and vocabulary and grammar to be able to discourse intelligently on the place of religion and belief in the modern world. What I mean by vocabulary and grammar is much, much more than simply being able to name the parts of a church or of a synagogue, for example. It's being able to construct meaningful propositions, evaluate their own arguments and assumptions about religion and belief, and also evaluate critically other people's arguments and assumptions about it. To be literate, you need both vocabulary and grammar. And so to be theologically literate, you need both the vocabulary of religion and belief and also the grammar, a real critical sense of how meaningful and defensible propositions are put together and how they can be critiqued. I think society is doing a number of strange and contradictory things at the same time. It is becoming more secular, it's also becoming more deeply spiritual, and its patterns of affiliation to religion are changing, but not necessarily disappearing, and religion itself is changing in many contradictory ways. People are asking about the real religious landscape in this country rather than the imagined one. What needs to happen with RE is that it needs to reflect religion and belief as it is really lived, really believed in, really loved or hated by people, by communities on the ground. The difficulty we have in RE is that where you've got curriculum materials that are being designed in part by religious leaders, faith leaders, sitting on agreed syllabus conferences and determining the content of religious education, and to some extent also determining the methods and approaches, that is not going to give you the real religious landscape. It's going to give you the landscape as imagined and as wanted by those faith leaders. Okay, so one good example, I think, of where the real religious landscape is not getting a look in RE curriculum design at the moment is the issue of the place of women in many religious communities and the wider issues around sexuality. There you've got a yawning disparity between the positions of faith leaders, the official positions of faith leaders and of faiths on the question of women and the question of divergent sexualities. Between that, on the one hand, and between the real lived practice of followers of those faiths and the questions that young people have, on the other hand. Now, which is the landscape that we want to be taught to young people? For me, and I think for most professional educators, we want the landscape that is rich and diverse and respectful and compassionate and inclusive to be taught to young people. More and more teachers that I listen to in schools are now saying there is a clear relationship between RE's underperformance in schools, as described by Ofsted last year, and the legal structures around the subject. This relationship takes many forms. It's partly to do with the way in which local agreed syllabuses are drawn up, involving a number of players who are not necessarily the best people to be designing curriculum materials for schools. It's also partly to do with the long-term deregulation of schools in this country. This is something which has been happening for the last 6 years or so, and as far as we know, it will continue during the lifetime of the next government as well. The long-term deregulation of schooling in this country means that local authority and central prescriptions on the curriculum are becoming less and less acceptable. And what is becoming more and more acceptable is web-based contagion of good practice, school autonomy within national legal frameworks. And there is an emerging and growing consensus in the RE community that the SACRE system at the moment does not serve that deregulating and freeing direction of travel well enough, and it needs to be changed. Every school is going to be slightly different in the way that it designs its curriculum, because the pupil makeup of every school is unique. It is the variance at school level, not at local authority level or regional level, that makes the difference. And it's responding to the interests, the identities, the needs of those young people, school by school, that is the key design principle for RE. To be able to impose some kind of prescription, some kind of syllabus of content at local level is no longer something that we need to do in this country. And prescriptions, heavy prescriptions from the centre, from national government, are also no longer appropriate. We do, I think, personally, need a national curriculum document on RE, but it needs to be light touch, it needs to prescribe levels of depth, it needs to prescribe the overall purpose of the subject, and it needs to defend the concept of diversity in curriculum planning. Well, one big innovation that I think is taking RE forward and will continue to do so is the web and social media. Websites like RE Online, courses like the Teach RE course, RE Today and NATRE's websites, hugely important in spreading good practice. And what is happening to the ways in which teachers use those resources online is that good practice is no longer something defined by somebody else and given to me as a teacher for me to receive and implement without any critical faculties. Good practice is now something that can be shared in internet forums, discussed, taken apart, put back together again in different ways, informed by research, always subjected to critical questioning in the context of particular individual schools, year groups and classes. I think the internet has revolutionized the whole idea of good practice in RE and indeed in every other subject as well. That is a good thing, and it shakes the foundations of what we're doing in, I think, a very constructive way.